So I've just switched. We can talk about 21st century skills as life skills, soft skills, hard skills. I'm just going to put them into a different a pack, employability skills, because I am very focused now on what is it, what are those particular ingredients that make for an individual's success in being recruited, putting self forward for a job, in being successful in the job, becoming beyond valuable to invaluable in that workspace, and of course through that then the opportunity for continued growth and development. I want to think then about what are the policy makers and implementers doing, and what are the implications in terms of these employability skills for their policy and how that policy is implemented. Through what's been happening in the UK, continues to be developing in the UK, and more specifically in England, and from that wonderful opportunity of working in your country for 2 of the 3 years I was here, where I was much more closely involved in your skills sector. But it's interesting, you see UK universities are attending much more now to the importance of employability over and above the content, the academic content of their degree, post-degree, post-bachelor's courses. Because employability, it's right across the piece, the importance of employability. The reality is that most of us have to work. We live in a global economy and the transaction is through money. So we need to get money some way, one way or the other, and of course I'm talking about legitimate means. And most of that is through employment. Not many of us, are born into fortunes. So employment of one kind or another, and let's take employment to also mean self-employment. So all of those skills that you might take some employment and then seek to set up your own business, of course, but you're bringing into that all of those skills. The kind of employment skills I'm thinking of are the generic ones. It really doesn't matter which sector or industry you might go into or what level or the sizes or anything. They are intrinsic to your success as an employee. Of course, you're also equipped with those kind of skills going to be a much more positive, dynamic citizen. You in your community, in the way that you nurture and bring up your own families. I mean, they don't stop and start at the entry to workplace. These are, hence, often described as life skills. But I mean, I again pick up lots and lots of surveys of employment organizations, and they time and time again are complaining about the lack of employability, and whether that's school leaver, whether that's somebody coming from a training program, somebody coming from a university, and their focus is largely on these softer employability skills. There's a sort of something around the basic academic might be there and the technical skills might be there, but we can't work with these people. And often that we can't work with these people comes down to the gap around those other skills. And we've heard already that there are, where I've said teachable, it sounds very, very sort of transactional. I don't mean that, but they can be addressed. So if we're making the statement that teachable, okay, so where and how? In all settings. However, we would say it's so much better if you're able to almost create a sort of, a replica work setting in an education setting. That's not always possible. It doesn't matter. Just clear everything out of the room. Use your imagination to create what might be a workplace. So they are possible in all settings. However, they come with some conditions, some requirements. Really important goals and objectives. They don't just happen. You have to think about this. And the implications of that then on, so what is the curriculum? If you're tied to a curriculum, how do I make that curriculum work for me in terms of looking for the opportunities for teaching and developing allowing the learners to develop their skills? It really requires, a different way of looking at teaching and learning styles. And through that, of course, it's really changing the dynamic, the power dynamic, if I can call that, between the teacher, trainer, and the learner. Because these styles have to be learner-centered. The teacher trainer has him or herself to feel confident enough to foster in the environment the spirit of inquiry, challenge. So the teacher, the trainer, is no longer the holder of all knowledge, all skills, all expertise in this at all. We're in it together. That is quite a challenge, I would say, to a lot of teachers and trainers who hitherto their training, their own training and development, their continuing professional development has tended to focus on keeping up to date perhaps with what's happening in the industry, the employment sector, and so on. This is about the teacher trainer knowing him or herself and holding exactly the same skills that clearly, we're keen to develop in and must be developed in our young people if there are gaps so far. So setting high expectations. This isn't just about racing through to the end of the training program, because the training program is 3 months, and as long as I get you there and you don't drop out, job done. That's not the responsibility, shouldn't be, of a trainer. The trainer's responsibility is set that expectations, and not only do you stay the course, during that course you are flourishing as an individual, you achieve according to everything that is in that program. Modeling the desired behavior, and really what I'm trying to say there is a lot of coaching facilitation is expected within the role of the teacher trainer to successfully encourage and ensure that environment continues to be there for the development of those skills. So what are the implications for education training, policymakers and implementers? Getting employer voice into the curriculum, into the standards, the switch so that we actually can measure through competencies and so on, that learning is happening, both it being skills and, of course, we're talking about employability skills broader than the technical skills. We're also getting employers involved in qualification design. Now, that's all fine and dandy, but remember they are employers with a particular way of looking at the world and expectation of the workplace. We as educators, it's our responsibility to put the filter through all of that, to ensure that what comes out the other end in terms of a curriculum qualification is equipping those young people, not necessarily for employment with employer X, but, more broadly than that. So getting the employer voice. Increased visibility of what we mean by employability skills. And again, that's coming through. And ditto into qualification frameworks. And here in India, they are part of the National Skills Qualification Framework template for all qualifications, carry the requirement for employability skills. Critically, because of what I said before, my view really is much more attention to be given to initial teacher training, in-service teacher training. How are we equipping our teachers and trainers with the very same skills that we're putting a very high premium, rightly so, that should be within the school, the preschool, the school, the college, the training and provider, the university, and so on. To give some examples, a couple of examples I've got about professional trainers and the kind of standards and approaches to the development of trainers. Trainers in India, and trainers in India aren't just on their own, in many, many countries, in my view, do not command the respect and the esteem that they should have. They're doing a really, really important job. But whether they see themselves as being part and doing a really important job, I don't know. And of course, we all know who we are by the kind of response of others around us. In the UK too, we take employability skills into our qualifications. A couple of examples here. A level 2 certificate in the UK, England's framework would be about the same as a level 4 in the NSQF, the National Skills Qualification Framework here in India. So we actually have qualifications in employability skills. Again, you can just see what's covered there. A mandatory unit on mindset, and then optional units around, self-improvement, personal effectiveness, problem solving, etc., etc. The building blocks, the foundations are here in India. Now, with the establishment of the National Skills Qualification Framework, I think this is now about 4 years into its existence. I think there's still a long way to go, but we have a National Skills Qualification Framework. The governance of that is under a National Quality Assurance Framework. National Skills Qualification Framework, that's what it seeks to set about. It's harmonizing academic, vocational. It allows learners to move across. It is very much about standardized, consistent, nationally accepted outcomes. It aspires to achieve international equivalence. I think that's a noble aspiration, but I think everybody involved in it realizes we're some way away to get there, but let's be ambitious. I'm always about being ambitious. So having a quality assurance framework is obviously the most important thing about ensuring quality, standardization, national acceptability, and so on and so forth. Okay? So there is an NQAF in place, and this was some work that I was involved in a project that ended last year with the NSDA. We were consulting and working on the criteria that training providers would have to meet to become approved to deliver NSQF qualifications. Assessment bodies who wanted to assess against NSQF qualifications the criteria that they would have to meet. Now, those manuals, as I understand it, are not yet fully operational. But, I'm hopeful another year or so. And I mean, the manual is neither here nor there. It's actually what lies behind it. It's a set of approval criteria and a requirement for those organizations to be learning organizations, to self-assess, to critically review, to actually embark and engage and embrace continuous improvement. So if those training providers have to do that, it requires all of the individuals, not least, of course, the trainers within their organizations, to embrace that spirit of continuous improvement, reflection, how can we do better, and so on and so forth. Seeing the physical resources are there is the easy bit. The emphasis in the manuals and the quality assurance framework going forward will be the essence of a successful training provider, which is around the people, not least the trainers, others as well, and so on. So there's going to be much more of a focus on how training providers recruit, train, support, performance manage, and so on, their trainers. There's going to be much more emphasis on learning, training effectiveness. What do we mean by that, of course, but at least the focus, and there was an expectation the organizations are measuring, monitoring, evaluating, and it's not just the technical skills, it's the whole shoot. And an emphasis too on formative assessment. The employability skills, where are they in NSQF qualifications? Well, they're a requirement. They're on the template that any submitting organization has to complete. In NSQF terms, we call them core generic professional. That's what they're defined as. Core generic, writing, reading, oral communication technology. Professional skills then get down into the ones that, we're seeing more and from the handbook, decision-making, planning, organizing, customer centricity, mix of communication, and all of the above, and so on. The question then is, well, how are these assessed? You won't see that at all, I don't think. India, I'm afraid, is obsessed with marks. Obsessed with marks, yeah? And so we take that obsession into how we're going to score someone, receiving feedback on work standards and customer satisfaction is worth 6 marks. That's bad, but then 2 of those marks are for theory and 4 for skills. and so on and so on. So each of these tiny little subsets of interact with colleagues, which is, you know, the overarching competence, is broken down like that. I defy anyone in the room to be able to say, so, you know, what would you give a 4, a 3, a 2, and a 1 to? So, of course, those marks are there, but we know what's going to happen. Just any old mark will go down. Any old mark will go down. Because it's just not possible. It's just not possible. I emphasize again, we have the building blocks here in India. We're into the implementation, however, and that's never easy. So, however, we've got employer voice embedded through the development of occupational standards and developments of qualifications from those standards and the approval of those. We certainly have started on reorientating the trainer program. We've got in theory, but again, my understanding at the moment, it's not actually mandated and not being followed through. We've got the visibility of the employment skills in the qualification templates. And we are seeing the importance in the sense that, you know, we're expecting, sorry, I'm going like that because I was thinking of the previous slide, these to be assessed in some way, but we're not even taking seriously how we support trainers or learners to know how competent they might be in interacting with colleagues. Somehow we need to dig down and find out what is happening. These NSQF qualifications with core generic professional skills are out there being taught. Trainees are going through them. I'd like to know what's happening with those core generic professional skills. Are they actually being given any attention, and are they being assessed, and if so, how? I think we should work with the SSC's training providers, assessment bodies should be coming together more than they currently do. It happens sporadically, but I think we need to get them more. And there is a task force, which I'm delighted to know is in existence now, that's about strengthening assessment in the skills system. We need to look at alternative approaches to the assessment of those skills. And of course, there's a lot to learn from, you know, the speakers to come and the discussions that are going on today. Critically, of course, the professional development of our education trainers, and I'm adding assessors there as well.
With regards to the trainers and what is required for them to be in order to start imparting these skills or have the learners learn these skills, you said really difficult criteria and difficult means of measuring these criteria. And you are talking about the scale of India, but is it even possible for us to achieve good training and assessments at this?
Everything is possible. I mean, I think, you know, when I always think about India, you know, it's scale that, you know, can quite easily start to make us feel almost defeatist before we begin, yeah? But there are plenty of, in fact, many of you here, if you like, the sort of the bright sparks, the light bulbs, the people who are really committed to making a difference. There are enough people and organizations to which they're attached to actually start to show how it can be done. The problem, of course, is that the government, national and state level, want to roll it out immediately everywhere. And that's their right, and they'll probably carry on doing that. But somewhere we have to allow some space with national government, primarily national government, go ahead to run along something which might be different, but actually is hoping to show the right way.
So actually for past 1 year, I've been looking at school to work transition and how early school leavers are being prepared through Indian vocational training system to transition into the world of work. And the observations that I made about the modular training programs, which are aligned with, you know, level 1, level 2, and so on. One of the major problems that I see is the presumption is that the students are having certain generic skills, which is numeracy and reading, writing skills, which actually are not existing, which ultimately impede their, core and learning of professional skills. And the 360-hour programs are really short in addressing actually the professional skills as well as the generic skills. So, so I was just thinking, when you were, you were adapting this framework from UK to India, what were the considerations about these challenges in terms of adaptability?
It's a very good question, but I mean, I'm afraid I would have to pass it on to whosoever was instrumental in, discussing with Indian agencies around how they were going to address that. I mean, this sounds like a real, sort of sloping shoulder, but personally, I wasn't responsible for that. It strikes me, just as you've said, this is a very clear need to take out those core generic skills and actually deal with those separately rather than, as well as having them embedded in technical skill qualifications, take them out, recognize them for what they are, and allow those to be funded programs, whether they're qualifications, the English system has those as qualifications. That might not be appropriate in India, I don't know. But focus on those, because you're absolutely right, getting those core generic skills will be a bar to their ability to pick up maybe some of the higher technical skills. So whilst it's good to see the very fact that the core generic professional skills are embedded in the technical skills qualifications, if the need is so great, and I can only, suppose that it's very great in what you say, why don't we actually just focus on those? It's not an either or. Focus on those, and then they move into the technical skills.